Most people assume narcissists feel nothing when they lose someone who genuinely loved them. What almost no one understands is that this specific loss produces something in the narcissist's psychology that no other loss creates, a pain they cannot name, cannot process, and cannot escape, no matter how many people they find to replace it with. There is a category of supply that the narcissist system encounters rarely, and that it is structurally unprepared to recognize as rare while it is being received. Genuine love, not the performance of love, not the admiration of someone in the idealization phase of a new relationship, still operating from incomplete information about who the narcissist actually is, not the conditioned attachment of someone whose psychological independence has been systematically eroded to the point where their continued investment reflects dependency rather than genuine feeling, but the specific, freely given, clearly perceiving love of someone who saw the narcissist with sufficient accuracy, who encountered the persona and looked beneath it, who experienced the manipulation and attributed it to wounds rather than writing it off, who stayed not because they didn't see what was happening, but because what they saw beneath the behavior activated in them a genuine and sustained care that persisted despite everything the behavior produced. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist system, while receiving this supply, was registering its exceptional quality without fully understanding its source. Something about this person's engagement felt different, richer, more sustaining, more genuinely nourishing than what ordinary supply sources provided. But the narcissist's interpretive framework for understanding supply is functional rather than emotional. And the functional interpretation of exceptional supply is that this is a particularly effective source to manage and extract from. Not that this is a fundamentally different kind of relational experience being offered. Pay attention to what this misinterpretation costs, because it is the foundation of the pain that cannot be escaped. The genuine love recognition arrives late, not during the relationship. When the recognition could have altered the dynamic, not even immediately after the loss, when the ordinary supply replacement process begins and temporarily masks the deficit. It arrives in the quiet moments that follow, when the replacement supply has been installed, when the performance of having moved on is well underway, and the system keeps registering a comparison that the replacement cannot satisfy. This is where the unconditional supply paradox reveals its most significant consequence. Because genuine love was offered without performance requirements, it didn't need the persona to sustain it. It didn't require the narcissist to be consistently impressive, consistently superior, consistently managed in their presentation. It was extended to something beneath the performance, and the narcissist, who has spent their entire relational life maintaining performances, specifically because they believed that only the performance was worth loving, received an experience that directly contradicted the foundational belief their entire behavioral architecture was constructed to protect. Most people miss this warning sign because the narcissist never acknowledged it. The hidden reason the acknowledgement was impossible is structural. Receiving genuine love would have required sitting with the experience of being loved for something beneath the persona. And that experience is precisely the one the persona was built to prevent. There is a quality to the relational environment that follows the loss of genuine love that the narcissist system registers with a consistency that new supply, new relationships, and new performances of indifference cannot fully suppress. Everything that follows feels hollow in a specific way. What most people don't realize is that this hollowness is not the ordinary dissatisfaction of someone who misses a particular person. It is a qualitative recognition, a detection operating beneath conscious awareness of the difference between supply that is performance, dependent, and supply that was offered freely. The new relationships provide admiration, they provide attention, engagement, validation, and the various other forms of supply that the narcissist system requires to function. But they provide all of these things in response to the persona, in response to the performance, the image, the carefully managed presentation that the narcissist offers to every relational environment. What they do not provide is the specific experience of having something beneath the persona engage with directly. And it is this, the authenticity void, that the narcissist system keeps detecting in the silence between the new supply's provision and the satisfaction the provision was supposed to produce. Pay attention to what this void produces in the narcissist behavior in subsequent relationships, because it generates a restlessness that manifests as accelerated cycling through supply sources, as an impatience with the idealization phase that previously felt genuinely exciting, as a quality of dissatisfaction that arrives earlier and more persistently in each new relationship than the relationship's circumstances seem to warrant. The hidden reason this pattern accelerates rather than resolves is that the narcissist keeps applying the supply replacement strategy to a deficit that supply replacement was never designed to address. This is where the incapacity confrontation surfaces, briefly, incompletely, and with the specific quality of an awareness that the psychological architecture's defensive systems immediately begin working to contain the narcissist. In these quiet moments of persistent hollowness comes closest to encountering a truth about themselves that the entire behavioral structure was constructed to prevent them from having to face. Most people miss this warning sign because what it produces externally looks like ordinary narcissistic behavior. More relationships, more supply seeking, more cycling through the familiar pattern. The hidden reason it is qualitatively different from ordinary supply behavior is what is driving it from the inside. Not simply the desire for more supply, but the specific unnameable awareness that what they lost was something their own personality structure made them incapable of keeping, and that the incapacity travels with them into every new relational environment they enter. There is a specific inadequacy that the narcissist replacement strategy reveals when applied to the loss of genuine love, one that becomes more apparent with each successive relationship that fails to produce the quality of experience the lost relationship, despite all its dysfunction, somehow contained the counterfeit problem. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist supply replacement process operates from a specific assumption that supply sources are ultimately interchangeable, that the particular qualities of any individual relationship can be replicated through a combination of finding the right new source and applying the conditioning process that shapes that source toward optimal provision. This assumption works reasonably well across most supply replacement scenarios. New people get idealized, conditioned, and gradually shaped into sources that provide supply with increasing efficiency. But it fails specifically and consistently when applied to the replacement of genuine love, because genuine love was never produced by conditioning. It was not the output of a process the narcissist engineered. It was offered freely from the genuine interior of a person who chose to care, despite having sufficient information to choose otherwise. And this means it cannot be replicated through the conditioning process, because the conditioning process produces responses, not choices. It produces compliance, not genuine feeling. It produces supply that arrives because it was shaped to arrive, not supply that arrives because the person providing it genuinely and independently chooses to. Pay attention to what this distinction produces in the narcissist's experience of new supply, because it is perceptible even through the narcissist's functional rather than emotional processing of relational experience. The new supply arrives. It provides the expected forms of admiration, engagement, and validation, but it carries none of the particular quality that the genuine love produced, none of the specific nourishment that came from being engaged with as a full human being, rather than as a persona to be admired. Most people miss this warning sign because the narcissist's behavior with new supply looks identical to their behavior with all previous supply. The hidden difference is in the internal register, the quiet, persistent awareness that what is being received is not what was lost. This is where the behavioral mirror effect reveals its most significant consequence. Because the person who genuinely loved the narcissist was also, by that love's nature, the only person in their relational world who consistently engaged with them as something beneath and beyond the persona. Everyone else in the narcissist's life responds primarily to the performance, the social persona, the carefully managed presentation, the specific version of themselves the narcissist offers to each relational context. These are what attract, sustain, and satisfy the people around them. The performance is what gets reflected back. The person who genuinely loved them responded to something different. Something that the performance was, in part, designed to conceal the actual person beneath it, with all the fragility, emptiness, and unresolved need that the persona's confidence and superiority were constructed to cover. There is a form of grief that the narcissist carries after losing genuine love that operates differently from every other form of loss their system has processed. And the difference is structural rather than emotional, rooted in a specific incompatibility between what genuine grief requires and what the narcissist's psychological architecture is capable of producing. Genuine grief requires acknowledgement. Acknowledgement of genuine loss, acknowledgement of genuine value in what was lost, acknowledgement of genuine responsibility for the conditions that produced the loss. Each of these acknowledgments requires something the narcissist system was specifically constructed to prevent. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's grief after losing genuine love is not absent. It is blocked, not through conscious suppression or deliberate avoidance, but through the automatic defensive operations of a personality structure that cannot incorporate genuine acknowledgement without threatening the foundational premises it was built to protect. The acknowledgement of genuine loss threatens the narrative of the narcissist's superiority, because something that was genuinely lost was genuinely valued, and genuinely valuing another person in any real sense requires the acknowledgement of their independent significance. The acknowledgement of genuine value in what was lost threatens the supply-object framework through which the narcissist processes relationships, because genuine love, recognized as such, cannot be categorized as simply an exceptional supply source without the categorization itself becoming obviously inadequate. And the acknowledgement of genuine responsibility for the loss threatens the accountability, avoidance that is one of the narcissist's most fundamental psychological operations. Pay attention to what blocked grief produces in the narcissist's behavioral presentation, because it does not simply disappear. It finds expression through the channels available to it. The restlessness that drives accelerated supply cycling, the persistent dissatisfaction with new relationships that produces devaluation earlier and more harshly than previous relationship histories predicted, the occasional, uninvited intrusion of specific memories that resist the reframing process and arrive with an emotional weight that the narcissist management systems were not built to process cleanly. Most people miss this warning sign because blocked grief looks, from the outside, like ordinary narcissistic behavior. The hidden reason it is qualitatively different is visible only in the pattern across time. The specific persistence of the restlessness, the specific quality of the dissatisfaction, the specific memories that keep returning despite the management strategies deployed against them. This is where the return compulsion reveals its most psychologically significant dimension. Because the narcissist who lost genuine love experiences a pull toward the person they lost or toward the experience that person represented. That is different in character from the calculated hoovering that characterizes ordinary supply re-engagement. It is not strategic. It does not arrive with a tactical plan or a specific re-engagement objective. It arrives sometimes years after the relationship has apparently been fully replaced and moved on from, as an uninvited awareness, in a quiet moment, in a particular kind of light, in the specific feeling of a new relationship supply arriving, and somehow failing to reach the place that the genuine love used to reach. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's return compulsion in this specific context is not about the person. It is about the experience of being genuinely known, which is the experience the genuine love provided, and that the narcissist's personality structure simultaneously craved and was constitutionally incapable of sustaining. Pay attention to what this compulsion reveals about the narcissist's interior experience, because it contradicts the self-sufficient needs, nothing presentation the persona maintains with remarkable consistency. The hidden reason the return compulsion surfaces, despite the persona's maintained indifference, is that it is not generated by the persona. It is generated by whatever exists beneath the persona, the part of the narcissist that the genuine love was actually responding to, that briefly and incompletely experienced being met, and that has been registering the absence of that experience in every subsequent relationship without having any sanctioned channel through which to express it. Most people miss this warning sign because it produces no visible behavior in the ordinary sense. It is internal, persistent, and entirely inconsistent with the public presentation of someone who moved on cleanly and completely. But it is there, and it continues to be there in ways that new supply, however abundant, however efficiently extracted, was never designed to address. There is a comparison that runs in the narcissist psychology after losing genuine love that is distinguished from every other post-relationship comparison by one specific characteristic: it never fully resolves. Most supply comparisons do resolve. The narcissist loses a supply source, experiences a period of deficit, acquires new supply, and through the conditioning process shapes that supply into something sufficiently optimized to replace the previous source at an adequate functional level. The comparison eventually settles as the new source becomes familiar and the previous one recedes in the operational relevance it holds for the system. What most people don't realize is that this resolution process depends on the previous supply being replaceable, on the thing that was lost being, at its core, a type of provision that a different source can eventually learn to provide in equivalent form. And genuine love is not that type of provision. Pay attention to what happens to the comparison when the thing being compared cannot be replicated through conditioning, because it produces a background process in the narcissist's psychology that runs continuously beneath the surface of every subsequent relationship, generating its evaluations quietly and delivering its conclusions to a part of the narcissist's internal experience that the behavioral management systems have only limited access to. The new supply is measured against what genuine love provided. The measurement consistently returns the same result. The deficit is registered. The management systems deploy their usual responses: increased supply extraction, accelerated relationship cycling, more intensive conditioning of available sources. And the comparison runs again. With the same result, most people miss this warning sign because it produces no single dramatic behavioral signal. It produces a pattern, the accelerating cycle, the persistent dissatisfaction, the devaluation that arrives faster and earlier in each successive relationship, that only becomes fully visible across sufficient time and sufficient relationships to make the underlying consistency apparent. This is where the existential echo completes the picture of what the narcissist cannot escape. Because beneath the operational pain of the unresolvable comparison, beneath the blocked grief and the return compulsion and the authenticity void, there is something that sits deeper than any of these specific experiences and connects them all. The quiet, persistent, entirely unacknowledged awareness that they encountered something in another person that their own nature prevented them from fully receiving. That the capacity for genuine love existed in someone who directed it toward them, and that the same personality structure that drew that love in also ensured, through the automatic operations of its own defensive systems, that it could never be adequately met, adequately honored, or adequately retained. The hidden reason this awareness cannot be escaped is that it is not external. It does not exist in the lost person, or in the relationship, or in any specific memory that could be managed through revision. It exists in the gap between what was offered and what the narcissist was capable of receiving. And that gap travels with them everywhere they go. The pain cannot be escaped because it is not located anywhere that escape is possible. It is not in the memory of the person. It is not in the specific relationship that ended. It is in the structural reality of a personality that encountered something it could neither fully receive nor retain. And that carries the evidence of this encounter into every subsequent relationship as a persistent, unresolvable, quietly devastating point of comparison. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's greatest pain is not what was done to them. It is the permanent awareness, however deeply buried, however thoroughly defended against, of what they were incapable of doing with what was freely given. And no amount of new supply, new relationships, or new performances of having moved on completely has ever been sufficient to make that awareness go away.